Well, may the best city win. The bidding war for e-commerce giant Amazon's second headquarters is brewing all over the country. More than 50 cities, well in excess of 50 cities, have expressed interest, including two in Indiana, all chasing a $5 billion investment and 50,000 jobs. In a new segment we're launching this week, Eye on Economic Development with KSM Location Advisors. We'll explore the pros and cons of deals like Amazon. And I'm pleased to welcome to the show this week CEO Tim Cook and President Katie Kulp. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay, unless you're living under a rock, you've heard about this Amazon project. It is huge. Any idea how many cities? Indianapolis is bidding. Gary has talked about putting a bid in Northwest Indiana. Any idea how many cities across the country?
Yeah, Gary, I think when you look at the interest that's been generated just here in Indiana, and then when you read the coverage throughout the country, I think at the end of the day, it's going to be anywhere from 50, 70, maybe 100 cities that compete in 20 plus states. Part of the attraction is this is the kind of deal that I think the three of us may not see again in our lifetime, given the investment, the number of jobs. So it makes sense that everybody's kind of going for broke on this one.
Question everyone is wondering here in Indianapolis in particular, does Indy have what it takes to compete? Now I want to get both of your takes on this. Tim, first you. Does Indianapolis, does the region have what it takes to compete?
I think it's going to come down to three things. Do they have the workforce to fill 50,000 plus high-paying jobs over the next 10 to 15 years? Can we come up with a really cool, attractive real estate option that's going to fit Amazon's requirements? And then lastly, quality of life is going to be a big issue. You're talking about Amazon, a company that's headquartered in Seattle that's got one of the greatest quality of life in the country. That's going to be a really high bar. And so it's going to be up to Indy to prove they can do all those three things. If they can't do that, I don't know that they get through the first round, but if they can do that, then I think they could go far in this process.
I think it's a long shot, but it's a long shot for a lot of communities, and I think it's such a good exercise to go through. Hopefully it is successful, but even if it's not, I think having materials at the end of the day that can be repurposed for other pursuits of economic development projects is really positive. And I think if we're really thoughtful about what the findings are, and if we aren't successful, learning why we weren't, that can be very instructive as we're looking at how to focus on some of the deficiencies we may have.
So win or lose, you feel it's good to compete?
Oh, absolutely. I think we were talking earlier today about how if we didn't put our proposal forward, what would that say? It would say we're not even playing on that field, and we are.
What is, you mentioned some of the challenges there, is there one big hurdle for Indianapolis, this region, to really overcome to be competitive? Is it workforce culture? What is the? Yeah,
I think a lot of people are talking about mass transit. I think that's been way overplayed. I think it's going to come down to the diversity of our workforce. Demographically, we're not as diverse as a lot of the competing cities. I think that's going to be an issue. I think even though we've emerged from the RFRA controversy pretty unscathed, with Amazon, you're talking about a CEO and Jeff Bezos, who, when Washington in 2012 passed their same-sex amendment and did that through a referendum, he put a lot of his own money into it, and that reflects his personal belief in it, but also is probably a cultural belief, something that India is going to have to overcome as part of their analysis.
And Katie, just from a workforce, just sheer number standpoint, the job market's a bit tight, especially in the tech area. Do you think just from a numbers perspective, that's a challenge for India?
It is tight here, and in fairness, it's tight everywhere. All of our similar kind of sister cities would be facing that. I think the challenge is the overall volume. We just simply are not as large as some of the markets we'll be competing against. And when you're talking about hiring 50,000 people, even over 10 to 15 years, that's a lot of bodies.
Yeah. Tim, you mentioned mass transit as a challenge being maybe a bit overplayed. The fact that we don't basically have that mass transit system. I've heard people talk about the fact if Indianapolis were to get it, you could kind of craft a mass transit system around something like this.
That's totally fixable. I mean, that is something, you can't make 1 million more people come to our market overnight, but you can fix mass transit and craft a solution that would be tailor-made for Amazon and would be helpful to the whole region.
And I find it hard to believe that if Indy checks every box in the front runner except for mass transit, that would be the reason we don't win.
There's a pretty short timeline to get the bid in, right? I mean, typically to put a bid in for something like this, it would probably take a lot longer.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're due by the bids are due by mid-October.
Yeah, I mean, they gave them less than 2 months to
Wow.
do it. I mean, Katie and I have worked with much less complex projects than that take 3 to 6 months minimum, so.
But again, I mean, don't you think that we're going to have that information? Companies typically, I mean, you'd love to have more time, but there's never enough time with these response windows. So we will have some information that will allow us to be more responsive and more quickly the next time around.
Okay, as we wrap up, Katie, I'll start with you. A lot of cities or number of cities being talked about as potential front runners. What are you hearing, or is there any consensus on favorites at this point?
Yeah, I am confident that there will be some surprises in the mix as they keep whittling it down, but there's a lot of talk about Boston. There's a lot of talk about Denver. I've heard Austin quite a bit. I think those would all be similar cultural fits to where they've been already.
Yep.
But I suspect there will be Indianapolis, and there will be some other kind of off-the-radar cities too.
Good. Tim?
The same cities. I
Yep.
think those are kind of the short list, and hopefully Indy can make a good showing and be right up there at the end of the
The
day.
underdog and come through at the end.
I would love that.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, me too.
Tim Cook, Katie Culp, KSM Location Advisors. Thanks very much. Looking forward to this this series going forward. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Gary.
And I'll be right back after this.